everyone, it's Sarah and welcome to my crochet channel. Today's video I'm going to be showing you how to crochet our Hexagon Washcloth crochet pattern. Now this is our 8th pattern in our Washcloth of the Month year-long crochet along for 2020. And like I said, it's our 8th washcloth, and it is a hexagon shaped washcloth. It makes a very pretty washcloth, as you can see, with just a solid color. And it makes a beautiful washcloth with variegated or even a scrubby yarn. And we'll talk more about yarns in just a second. Now this pattern measures about 9 by 9 inches across. And remember, the measurements really depend on how tightly or loosely that you crochet. So don't panic if it's a half an inch smaller or larger. And if you want it to be the exact size, you can always add an extra row of single crochet around the edge. What we're going to be learning today in this pattern is the 2 double crochet cluster, which we will be doing on the corners, and then solid double crochet in the shape of a hexagon. Now you can find this free crochet pattern in the notes underneath this video, along with the link that has all of the previous washcloths as well. And both those links for the pattern and for all the patterns for all the previous washcloths, I'll put both those links down in the notes underneath this video. To make one of these hexagon washcloths, you're going to need about 1 ounce to 1.5 ounces of cotton yarn. This one here is just made with 100% cotton, which can be peaches and cream or sugar and cream or any cotton that you might have on hand. This one here is made using this sugar and cream scrub off yarn. It has portions of scrubby yarn and variegated and solid colors all worked in each skein. This one is called Pretty Purple, and they have lots of wonderful shades, and you can see that there are portions of scrubby yarn and portions of cotton yarn. Of course, it's all cotton, even though the scrubbies have these little scrub bumps on them, is what I call them, and it works really nice for scrubbing the bathtub or scrubbing the kitchen sink or the dishes. All right, so what I'm going to be doing today is using this yarn here. It's called Isaac Mizrahi, and it's made by Premier Yarn, and it is a number 4. And you're going to need a number 4 no matter what cotton yarn you choose to make. Solid, variegated, or variegated with scrubby. And you can change colors as often as you want, or you can do it all the way through. And so, like I said, I'm going to be using this one. The name of this color is Brooklyn, and it is Premier, and I purchased this from Michael's about 1 year ago. And so I don't know if it's discontinued or they still have it. I haven't checked, but it's a wonderfully soft cotton, and I thought it would work great for this pattern. But remember, you can use any cotton or even a cotton blend if you prefer for this pattern. We're going to be stitching with our H hook today, which is a 5.0 millimeter crochet hook, and you'll need a needle to weave in those ends, and of course your handy scissors. All right, let's get started. We're going to begin with our slip knot. We're going to chain 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to join this chain 5 into a circle. So we'll put the tail of yarn over our hook and pull it through that loop, and then we'll snug it down. We'll tie that little stay knot so our loop doesn't come undone. Now I'm starting with this chain 5 loop. If you prefer to do a magic circle, that will work as well. We're going to put our hook in and pull up a loop, yarn over, and we're going to go right back in and pull up a loop and only go through the first 2 loops. All right, yarn over, go in, pull up a loop, yarn over, and only go through the first 2 loops. So now I have 2 unfinished double crochets and another loop. So I have 3 loops. Yarn over and pull through all 3 of those loops and chain 2. That's our first 2 double crochet cluster. All right, let's do it again. Yarn over, go in, pull up a loop, yarn over, and go through the first 2 loops. Yarn over, go in, pull up a loop, yarn over, and just go through the first 2 loops. We have 2 unfinished double crochets and that 3rd loop. So yarn over and go through all 3 and chain 2. So now we're going to keep repeating till we have 6 groups of 2 double crochet clusters. There's 3. Chain 2, there's 4. Chain 2, 5, and we'll do one more. Chain 2. Now we're going to join to that first stitch, and we're going to slip stitch in that chain 2 space and chain 1. We'll turn this over. We'll gently pull on that string. We'll go ahead and weave this in. Make sure that's going to stay nice and snug. We don't want this washcloth having a hole in the middle in it, especially if it's going to be a gift, but also if you're washing the dishes or the sink. Alrighty, now we're going to cut that. Alright, let's do row 2. We're going to yarn over, we're going to go in and pull up a loop, yarn over and go through the first 2 loops, yarn over, go in, pull up a loop, yarn over, and just go through the first 2 loops. There's those 3 loops, yarn over, go through all 3 and chain 2. And then we're going to stitch another 2 double crochet cluster in this chain 2 space. And that's that first corner. Now we're going to stitch a double crochet between these next 2 double crochets. So yarn over, go in between, and stitch just a regular old double crochet. Now we'll come to our next chain 2 space and we'll stitch the double crochet cluster, chain 2, and another double crochet cluster. Now we'll go to these next 2 double crochets and stitch a double crochet between those 2 double crochets. And this is the way the row 2 will work. The 2 double crochet cluster, chain 2, and a 2 double crochet cluster in each of the corners. Then we'll double crochet between those next 2 double crochets. And so this is the way that row 2 will be stitched up. We'll stitch those 2 double crochet clusters with the chain 2 in between. Double crochet between those next 2 double crochets and repeat. There we go. Now I have 2 more corners. There's that next corner. Now double crochet between those next 2 double crochets, and then our last corner. All right, there's my 2 double crochet clusters with my chain 2 in between. Here's my last double crochet between those 2 double crochets. And I'm going to join to that first. There we go. Stitch with a slip stitch, and then I'm going to go right to this chain 2 space and slip stitch and chain 1. All right, let's take a look at it. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 corners, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sides. And that's how row 2 should look. All right, looks like we're ready for row 3. So we're here in our first corner. So we'll make our first 2 double crochet cluster. We're going to chain 2 and do again that 2 double crochet cluster, and that's how each of our corners will be stitched. All right, so now we're going to skip this first stitch right here, and then we're going to stitch a double crochet in the next 3. So 1, 2, and 3. Now we're going to go to our next chain 2 space and stitch those 2 double crochet clusters with the chain 2 in between. One and 2. There's our 2 double crochet cluster. Now you'll notice, I want you to look at this real close. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stitches. We're going to skip the first and stitch a double crochet in the next 3. 1, 2, 3. We're skipping this last one because if you look, that's the 2 of the cluster. Okay? And then we go to our next chain 2 space. Just so that I clarify that, I want you to see 1, 2. I want you to see how it looks. Oops, there we go. All right, so let's look at this side. Now, even though it appears that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 double crochets, there are actually 2 clusters and a double crochet. And that's why we're only going to stitch 3. We're basically skipping the first and the last, even though there are only 3 stitches when you look at the top of the edge. All right, so we're going to stitch 1, 2, 3 double crochets, and then that brings us back to our next corner. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do the 2 double crochet cluster, chain 2, 2 double crochet cluster, and then 3 double crochets on each side, and repeat this all the way around till we get back to where we started. I have completed row 3, stitching my 2 double crochet cluster, chain 2, and 2 double crochet cluster, and then 3 double crochets on each of my 6 sides. We're going to join to that first stitch with a slip stitch, and then slip stitch in our chain 2 space and chain 1. All right, let's do row 4. We'll begin with, again, our 2 double crochet cluster, chain 2, and 2 double crochet cluster, and again, I want you to look at this because we have 2 and 2 on the ends, and that's actually the cluster, and so we're going to stitch 5 double crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now we're at our next chain 2 space. So we'll stitch our 2 double crochet cluster, chain 2, and 2 double crochet cluster. And again, we're going to stitch 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 double crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now, there we go. Got a little splitty there. Now, I just want you to remember when you're working your sides, it's going to appear that there's 6 and 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But the first 2 here and the first 2 here is 1 double crochet cluster. It's 2 double crochet cluster, but it's just one of those clusters. And so we're only going to stitch 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on each side. And then our corners will always be the same. You'll stitch 1, 2 double crochet cluster, chain 2, and then another 2 double crochet cluster. There we go. And then 5 double crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then you'll repeat that on these next corners and sides. 2 double crochet cluster, chain 2, 2 double crochet cluster, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 double crochets on the side. I completed row 4, again stitching a 2 double crochet cluster, chain 2, 2 double crochet cluster in all the corners, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 double crochets on each of the 6 sides. We're going to join to the top of that first stitch and slip stitch in the next and chain 1. Now, for row 5, it's pretty much the same as row 4. The only difference is in between here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, it looks like we have. But remember, the first 2 double crochets here and here are a 2 double crochet cluster. All right, so let's get started. We'll start with our 2 double crochet cluster, chain 2, 2 double crochet cluster, 1 and 2. There we go. And now we're going to stitch 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 double crochets, and this brings us to our next chain 2 space. So we'll stitch our 2 double crochet cluster, chain 2, and a 2 double crochet cluster. And now again we're going to stitch 7 double crochets. Whoops, that's 5, 6, and 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. That brings us to our next corner. And again, our corners are a 2 double crochet cluster, chain 2, and a 2 double crochet cluster. And so what we're going to do is we're going to repeat what we did here on these other sides. A 2 double crochet cluster, chain 2, 2 double crochet cluster, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 double crochets on each of the sides. I completed row 5. I joined to the top of my first stitch with a slip stitch and then slip stitched in the chain 2 space and chained 1. And you should have again 6 corners with your 2 double crochet cluster, chain 2, and 2 double crochet cluster, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 double crochets on each of your 6 sides. All right, let's do row 6. And again, row 6 is similar. We're going to do our 2 double crochet cluster in our corner, chain 2, and our 2 double crochet cluster. And again, your corners are always the same. And now, instead of stitching 7 stitches, we're going to stitch 9 double crochets. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Nine double crochets. All right, now we're going to go to our next corner and again stitch our 2 double crochet cluster, chain 2, and 2 double crochet cluster. And we'll repeat those 9 stitches. And so what we're doing for row 6 is we're doing a double crochet, 2 double crochet cluster, chain 2, 2 double crochet cluster in each of our corners, and then 9 double crochets on each side, and we'll repeat this all the way around. Row 6 is now completed. We have our 6 corners or points with our 2 double crochet cluster, chain 2, 2 double crochet cluster, and 9 double crochets on each of our 6 sides. I slip stitch to the first stitch, slip stitch in the chain 2 space, and chain 1. So now for row 7, you've already got the pattern down. It's going to be a piece of cake. We're going to stitch our 2 double crochet cluster, chain 2 in our corner there, and another 2 double crochet cluster, And this time on the sides, we're going to be stitching 11 double crochets. There's 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Now we're at the next chain 2 space, and again we stitch our 2 double crochet cluster, chain 2, and a 2 double crochet cluster, and 11 double crochets on the side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, and 11. And that is the repeat for row 7. Our 2 double crochet cluster, chain 2, 2 double crochet cluster, and 11 double crochets on the side. And we'll repeat that all the way around and join back to our first stitch. Row 7 is now complete. We have our 2 double crochet cluster, chain 2, 2 double crochet cluster in each of our corners, and then we have our 11 double crochets on each of our sides. All right, now our last row, we're just going to stitch a row of single crochets around. So what we're going to do is we're going to stitch 2 single crochets in the chain 2 space, and then we'll stitch 1 single crochet in each of the stitches on the side. And I really prefer to use just a basic single crochet trim on this pattern. It helps it hold its shape, and it doesn't take away from the shape of the hexagon. Two single crochets in the chain 2 space, one single crochet in each of the stitches to the next chain 2 space, or on the side, however you want to say it. The main thing is we're stitching 1 single crochet in each stitch and 2 single crochets in each of the chain 2 spaces. And you'll continue to repeat this all the way around till we reach back to that first single crochet. So we're stitching 2 single crochets in the chain 2 spaces of each of our corners, and then 1 single crochet in each of the stitches on all 6 of the sides. I completed that edge of single crochet all the way around, stitching those 2 single crochets in the corners, and that just kind of helps it keep its shape for the shape of the hexagon, and it also gives it a nice edge, of course. All right, so we're going to join to that first single crochet with a slip stitch, and we're going to cut our yarn. We'll put our hook in the next stitch and pull that loop to the back and tie off to the back. and it gives it just a much nicer and neater appearance when we tie off to the back. Now we've already weaved in our stitches down here, or our yarn down here in our stitches, and all we have left to do is to weave in this last little tail of yarn. So here is the washcloth that we just completed. Here is the white one that's a solid, and here is this purple one that is the scrub off yarn. So now you can see that there are lots of options for making the hexagon washcloth. Variegated and scrubby, solid, and striping. So there's lots of different ways you can make this one pattern. And you know I love to give you lots of options.